Hello and welcome back to another edition of Around the Association. I'm your host, Charles Fallon, back in here with the final episode of the season. And oh my goodness, did championship week at Belltown live up to the hype and then some? We have to talk about that insane battle for the Cup Series championship. Braeden Bennett versus Todd Kidd came down to turn three of the last lap. The championship was on the line, and it ended up being Braeden Bennett who prevailed with it. We'll talk all about that dramatic finish, what it means for Braeden Bennett and Michael White Racing's legacy. Obviously, with Randall Woods now officially retired, Bennett is going to be the new face of Toyota, of Michael White Racing, well throughout the rest of this decade and well into the 2030s. We also have to talk about Todd Kidd. Man, what a tough way to lose back-to-back championships. It looked like for sure he had it, but we'll talk about the finish from his perspective. Can he bounce back next year and potentially score that second title? We'll see. We also got to talk the Craftsman Series championship, and wow, did things go south in a hurry for Caden Dunham. Yeah, we'll talk about all about that one, as well as Gunnar Thorson prevailing for Tidley Motorsports' first title in the ASCA. Um, we'll talk about Belltown as a whole and what a show it put on for championship week. Obviously, a lot of discussion about the finale potentially being moved. I think that maybe those rumors should calm down a little bit after what we saw this weekend, to say the least. Um, yeah, because Belltown, boy, did this track put on a show and then some. And then we'll also talk about the season as a whole, because this is, like I said, the last episode of the season. So it's going to be a long one. Buckle up. We got a ton of podcast topics to talk about. And first, before we get into it, we got to shout out the ASCA's merch shop. Um, by the time this is uploaded, I believe there should be some Braeden Bennett Championship merch up. If not, it'll be up very soon. So if you want to rep the new reigning champion in the Cup Series, you can do so by clicking that link in bio and copying some Braeden Bennett Championship gear. Or A, if you want to cop some Randall Woods Farewell Tour gear, now that his last season is officially in the books to commemorate an incredible career from the two-time champion. You can do that as well. We also got a shout out Circle B Diecast / Plan B sales. Use coupon code ASCA for reduced shipping on any orders $30 or more inside the US. So without further ado, let's get into it and let's get right to the finish. Man, I this is a tough one, man, because this is going to be an extremely polarizing topic, and it's really one that you have those Monday morning water cooler discussions about. Braeden Bennett versus Todd Kidd, last lap, a championship is on the line. And let's set the scene for you. In case if you have not watched that finish, first off, go watch that finish right now. You need to do it immediately because I know that last year's title decider received all of the hype with that fantastic closest championship battle in history, in fact, between Todd Kidd and Diego Ricciardi. But this year's, I didn't think last year's could be topped, but this year's definitely topped it. This year's was easily the greatest title decider in ASC history. That it does not get much better than what we saw on Saturday night, to say the least. And like I said, let's set the scene for you. So I think round lap 150, Todd Kidd is comfortably in the lead from Braeden Bennett, and he slips up. He makes a mistake. He slips off the bottom. Bennett capitalizes. He immediately makes a move. They make a little bit of contact. Bennett slides up the track down into turn one, but he ends up taking the race lead. And then Bennett's just kind of driving away. 15 laps to go. Looks like he's good to go for his Maiden Cup Series championship. No pressure from behind. Kids saying his tires are dead. You're thinking, oh, it's pretty much over at this point. And then Marcus Edwards strikes for the 7th time this season. I have no idea what the hell he was doing. He just drove way too deep into turn one. He's 2 laps down, mind you, when this is all going on. He's 2 laps down, and he drives it way too deep into turn one. Correction, I think it was 3 laps down, actually. It makes it even worse. Drives it way too deep into turn one, gets into the lead lap car, Shane Park, who I believe was 9th at the time, and spins himself around, collects Chris Barrymore as well. So that brings out a caution with 15 laps to go, the third one of the night. And then it becomes decision time. Do you stay out and keep the track position, because it is incredibly difficult to pass at Belltown, but you're on basically 100 lap old tires? Or do you box for 4 fresh tires and fuel and, try to make up positions in the final few laps of the season? And Bennett, he has the race lead. He chooses to stay out. So the analytics overwhelmingly did support staying out. It was 60% to stay out, a 30% chance of winning if you box. Kid, though, he already radioed. His tires were gone. He was like, why not? Let's come in. Let's fire 4 fresh tires at it. And because that was his only shot at victory. He was not going to beat Bennett straight up on older tires. Bennett had done a much better job managing his throughout the stint, as he always does. So that's why I guess his crew chief, Fred Book, felt comfortable that, hey, my driver's really good at tire management. Like he's managed these tires well enough. I think that he can hold on, even if there is some sort of late charge. And I believe I know it was Lester, Diego, and there was one other driver who decided to stay out. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but they also decided to stay out because there were 3 others that decided to stay out with Bennett. So that was the move there. And then we get down to the final restart. Also, one other thing to note is that this also was a lengthier caution period because a bunch of fluid was dropped down by Edwards and Barrymore when they hit the outside wall. So they bled a couple more laps than they normally would have, I should say. Not that they should have bled the extra laps, because you got to make sure that the track is saved for the most pivotal restart of the season. But that is also a factor as well, because the restart did come with only 5 laps to go. And Bennett's restarting in the lead. Todd Kidd restarting 5th. Green flag flies again. 5 laps to go. And before you know it, Todd Kidd's already back up to 2nd. You're like, whoa. How did that one happen? Yeah. Kidd was absolutely mowing down because Diego, he spun his tires on the outside in 4th. Lester, I think Lester restarted on the outside. There was one other car who also stayed out. I keep forgetting who it was, but yeah, it may have been Atwood, not 100% sure, but yeah, they were a sitting duck, and then Kidd ended up blitzing by Lester by the end of the lap after the restart. So he's already up to 2nd with 4 laps to go. And Bennett, though, luckily got a fantastic jump. As the control car, he had built up a solid enough gap, and he had to use up all of that gap over the next 4 laps. Come down to the white flag, and the gap is nothing. Kidd is right there, closing up to the back of Bennett. And this is where things get hairy. Down into turn 1 and 2 for the final time. Kidd gives Bennett a shot through 1 and 2 to let him know that he was there. Bennett slides up the track on exit off turn 2, and then down the backstretch, Kidd has his nose in there. And this is where I think that you have to evaluate things from Braeden Bennett's perspective. He can see his first championship is if he gets to the checkered flag first, because If Todd Kidd wins that race, he wins the championship via tiebreaker again. So Bennett knew he had to win that race or he was going to lose the title. And again, like I said, think about it from his perspective. He had the title in the bag before that late caution. He knows that this is Michael iRacing's opportunity to win their first championship since 2021, something that they've been working towards for the past 2 years. They've been down for the past 2 years. His first opportunity at a title decider. He had been so fast all weekend. And like I said, he can see his first championship waiting in the distance. He's also on basically 100 lap old tires, kids on extremely fresh rubber. Like what more could he have done realistically entering turn 3? Now, I get it. I certainly understand from Todd Kidd's perspective why he's upset, because I would be fuming too in that situation. Bennett turns down directly into him and basically squeezes him into the inside wall, and Kidd ends up losing control and backing it into the fence. Like, yeah, is that dirty in a vacuum? Yes. But when you consider the circumstances, when you consider what was on the line, I mean, what else is Braeden Bennett supposed to do there? Is he supposed to just let Todd Kidd go by? Like, here you go. Here's your second championship on a silver platter. Like he was in an extremely vulnerable spot, and he knew that if he wanted to win the title, that was the only way he was going to be able to do so. All that hard work he had put in over the course of the season, and he was witnessing it almost go out the window right before his eyes in real time, due to a bad pit call. Again, it wasn't even his fault that he decided to stay out. Obviously, he co-signed the decision, but that's on his crew chief, Fred Book, to tell his driver, hey, maybe staying out at 100 lap old tires isn't the best idea for one final restart. And even still, Bennett executed. Like he could have spun the tires. And if he did spin the tires on the restart, it definitely would have been wraps. So, I can't fault Bennett for that decision. I would have faulted that completely on his crew chief if he would have lost it. And even still, like I said, Bennett was pulling away before the late caution. And yeah, so it's just, for Braeden Bennett, I completely understand. And for Todd Kidd, I completely understand. But for Bennett, it's one of those situations where I feel like you have to do what you got to do. And it's just, he had to make that move or he was not going to win the championship. And I definitely what were you guys' thoughts on the move? Let us know in the comments down below, because I definitely want to hear, because it's obviously a controversial moment, maybe one of, if not the most controversial moment in ASCA history. And again, I don't think Bennett is even a dirty driver. He isn't. He's never been dirty throughout his career. But when you have a shot at the championship, all that goes out the window, man. Like, I'm not saying, completely wreck a guy for a championship. And we'll talk about someone who did a little bit later in the show. But I'm not saying Todd Kidd deserved to have that happen to him. But what I am saying is that if you were in his shoes, hell, if Todd Kidd was in his shoes, Todd Kidd would have done the exact same thing in those circumstances with your back against the wall and seeing no way out. Like, you got to do what you got to do. And I feel like that's exactly what Bennett did. So that's my thoughts on the finish. I know this is probably way too long as is, but I feel like I need to dedicate a lot of time to break down what happened and my thoughts on it. And that's basically that. I think it's a racing incident, maybe a little egregious, but again, what would you have done in that same situation and those same circumstances? I think that most everyone listening or watching would have done the exact same thing. So that's my thoughts on it. Like I said, let me know yours in the comment section below. But let's talk about what Bennett's championship means for his legacy and for Michael White Racing's legacy as a whole. Because obviously, as I mentioned, Randall Woods is retired. He will no longer be driving the number 18 in 2027. That'll be Tony Del Valle's second. He'll be moving up to a vice chairman role at the team. And obviously, that's a huge loss. That's the ASC's all-time wins leader right there. Woods, 27 Cup victories to his name, 2 Cup championships, the only 2 Cup championships for Toyota and Michael White Racing in the sport, mind you. So not having him, well, until Saturday night, now Bennett, of course, scored the third, but not having him as the team's franchise driver is a big blow. And that leaves a gaping void at the team that you would think now would be filled by Braeden Bennett. And it's crazy that we're talking about Bennett like this, considering flashback to the early portions of last year. Bennett is like 21st in points. He got off to a disastrous start to the season, 2 DNFs in the first 3 races, and his contract was expiring after the 2025 season. So it was genuine discussion that Michael White Racing may look to move on from him in the number 11 and bring in Tony Del Valle II to that seat for 2026. Obviously, that didn't end up happening, and Bennett completely turned his season around over the course of the next 3 weeks. He finished second at the Stone Yard. He finished first. His first career win came at Orlando, and then circled back with another second at Belltown. And that's when he really burst onto the map, and we kind of discovered, hey, this kid's got a ton of talent. But yeah, it's just crazy to think that early portion of last year, he's on the hot seat. And now you fast forward to today, and I think that it's safe to say he's got essentially a lifetime contract at Michael White Racing. Even though he hasn't signed it in motion, he's going to get a long-term deal done with the team here eventually. Like, basically, Michael White is going to sit down when they sit down and negotiate an extension and say, here's a blank check. How much do you want? Because obviously championship caliber drivers do not grow on trees. Championship winning drivers don't grow on trees. There's a difference between championship caliber and championship winning. And now Bennett can add his name to the championship winning club. And this is the crazy part. This was only his 3rd season in the ASCA. Only his 3rd season. And he's a champion. At the age of 25. Like, you don't see that every day. It took Todd Kidd until he was 29 to win his first title. I think it took Atwood until he was 27 to win his first. It took Woods until he was 31 to win his first. It took Hood until his late 20s, early 30s to win his first. Like, these young guys it takes them a while to figure out learning how the game works and learning how these championship battles work. It takes them a while to figure it out. So for Bennett to get it right away, his first time in a true title fight, even Greg Healy won his first championship at 25, but he had the stinker in 2020 where he had the championship lead and blew it down the stretch. Bennett in his first title fight delivered immediately. And again, like I said, he's only going to be 26 years old next season. You got to think he has at least another decade of racing in him, if not more. He's just getting started. He only has 5 career wins to his name, which is the least for a champion in a very long time. I would say it's the least for a champion since Diego Urquidy back in 2015. And that was obviously the strike shortened season. Diego only had 3 wins to his name back then. And obviously we know the driver that he turned out to be. I think this could very well be another Diego type of situation where you have Bennett, who's now burst onto the scene. He's established himself as this megastar now. And like I said, he's only just getting started. Like, the best is yet to come from this kid. He coped with the pressure brilliantly in this scenario, but as he continues to get more experience and win more races and get more confidence under his belt, like, the best is yet to come out of this kid. And Michael White Racing, they found a gem. He was only a 3-star prospect going into it. And this is why I mentioned, with all these 4-star guys that teams are throwing into these Craftsman Series seats for next year, that's why I have some trepidation with them, because some of those guys are going to end up flaming out. Meanwhile, you look at some of these 3-star guys who are going to continue to rise through the ranks, continue to prove themselves, and could very well be the next Braeden Bennett. And because you look at Bennett, and Colin Ward was actually signed as a dev prospect around the same time Bennett was coming up through the ranks. And if you would have asked anyone back then between Bennett or Ward, who had the better prospects of being something at the Cup level, everyone would have said Ward. If you would have asked anyone between Bennett and Park, who would have won a Cup title first, everyone would have said Park. This has always been a guy in Bennett who's been slept on until he went out and proved it last year. Like, yeah, I'm on that level of Todd Kidd. I'm on that level of Diego Key. I'm on that level of Shane Park. I just need the equipment to show it. And, well, he got that equipment this season. Finally, after 2 down years at Michael White Racing, the team, they nailed the new regulations. He gets the equipment, and he puts on a show. He coped with all the pressure brilliantly. I didn't think he would. I'll take the L here. I said it'd be a slam dunk. Todd Kidd would win this running away. Bennett coped with the pressure brilliantly, and he proved me wrong 100%. So major shout out to Braeden Bennett. Despite all the controversy, a championship is a championship. And I think that we all know deep down he's not a dirty driver. That's not how he acts. It's just, what would you do to win a title? And I get it. Todd Kidd is not going to be happy with him. I think that's one of the more interesting developments from this is that rivalry. That is now a rivalry going forward. Todd Kidd versus Braeden Bennett. Like, Kidd is not going to be happy about that moving forward. I guarantee it. And he's not going to forgive Bennett. They didn't really have much of a rivalry going into Saturday night, but they damn sure do now. So, yeah, that's definitely going to be one to follow in 2027 and beyond, to say the least, because those are obviously two of the, if not the 2 best drivers in the series right now. I would say probably the 2 best, considering Diego really fell off this season. And speaking of Todd Kidd, let's talk about it, because we also need to give who was the defending champion his flowers, because the fact that he even made it to this point is a miracle in itself. I remember earlier in the season, I had Nick Douglas on here, and we were discussing everyone crapping on him, calling him Todd Mid because he had 2 DNFs. He was last in points. He was off to the worst start to any season for a defending champion. It was not going very well for him, to say the least, with the new regulations. He looked lost. Like, it took 3 straight 6th place finishes before he finally scored his first top 5 at Belltown in the 6th race of the season. And, I think we had all kind of written Kidd off. It was looking like, oh, it's going to be Colin Ward. Oh, it's going to be Brent Renner. It's going to be Braeden Bennett. It's going to be maybe Randall Wood sneaking his way up there. Then Shane Park went on that big run at Michigan and got himself back in the mix. I don't think Carson Smith was up there as well briefly. Greg Healy was up there. Like, it seemed wide open, the championship, and Kidd was not one of the names that anyone was really throwing around until the second half of the season. And he gets on that run. He gets a 3rd place at Utah, and then he goes on that podium scoring streak where he gets all those top 3 finishes in a row and pushes it to the title decider. And boy, did he take the fight to Braeden Bennett. Because I'll tell you, after practice and after qualifying, it wasn't looking too good for Todd Kidd. It really wasn't. It was looking like Bennett was just going to blitz the field, and that would be wraps. And that's the way the first half of the race went. Although credit to Doug Bowden, he was definitely pressing Bennett in the opening laps. Fortunately, got taken out in an accident, which very nearly took out Bennett for that matter. it was mere inches. Like you could stick a paper in between Alau's and Bennett's rear quarter panel. Like it was that close by mere inches. Bennett's title hopes could have very well have ended right there. But Bennett, in race conditions, you could tell he was vulnerable. And then Kids Pit Crew, they get him the lead out of the pits, and he holds on to it for the next 102 laps until obviously the little slip up. And then even at the end, they don't give up. They get that late caution. They fire for fresh tires at it. They take, and that was a gamble at the time. It was a gamble. Like I said, the analytics were not really posting that as a good idea, that you should gamble on taking the fresh tires. Like that did not look like a good call at the time. Ended up being one in the end, but yeah, they take the gamble for 4 fresh tires because they know that was going to be their only shot at it, and it almost paid off very nearly. And I think that for Kid, this is going to be the one that got away, because I think without the DNFs, he runs away with this championship easily. It's not to take away from Braeden Bennett, but Todd Kidd was easily the best driver this season. Just to come back from dead last in points and push it to a title decider, damn near steal a championship for that matter, from last in points. Like that doesn't happen every day. That's an even bigger comeback than the ones Diego Urquidy had in 2020 and 2022. Like I remember in 2020, he was like 12th in points, 37 back, and everyone was talking about, the miraculous comeback Diego had to win his 3rd championship that year. 2022, he was like 20th in points, and he had that big comeback to push it to a title decider. Todd Kidd was 24th in points, dead last, staring up at everyone, has that ridiculous second half of the season. And like I said, he almost won the entire thing. So without the DNS, Kidd would have I think he probably would have clinched the title in West Virginia. Like he was that good the second half of the season. When he's in a form, he's unstoppable. And I get it. You have that quote unquote Mickey win at Ajax Super Speedway thrown in there. But besides that, there's not really any big blemish. And I will say, you look back at the Windows 300, you look back at the Northern 200, bad results those 2 nights. What if those didn't happen? Would Kidd have had to win the race to win the championship? Because if he didn't have to win the race to win the title, I think he gets the job done. Because Bennett, what is he going to do? Is he going to back up to Kidd and brake check him and try to defend for second? Because he had worked his way up to second. Like if he just needed second to win the title, he gets the job done. But fortunately, he had to win. He had to go for the move on the last lap, and it didn't pay off. And, like I said, I understand his frustration with Bennett. I'll be very interested to see if there's a rivalry between these two moving forward. But obviously, I've already justified Bennett's situation. Like he was more than like he gets the justification from me to do what he did, even though you can call it dirty, whatever you want to call it. It is what it is. What would you do for a championship? So let's also talk about next season for Todd Kidd. Can he bounce back from a loss like this? Because you look at what happened to Diego the following season, and where was he? 14th in points. It was by far his worst season in the ASCA. Now, granted, I will say that for Diego, there were circumstances out of his control, like Ford being terrible with the new regulations. I think that if you had the old regulations, you ran it back with the old regs another year, I think Diego has a much better season than what he did. I think that obviously Ronnie Woods Motorsports don't need to worry about nailing the new regs, because clearly they did. And they're going to be firing on all cylinders, guns a-blazing next year from the word go. I think that also helps out Todd Kidd, because he's not going to have that engine blowing up at the Streets Computerville. He won't have to worry about that, because they've ironed out the reliability and all the teething problems that they had with the new regulations. So you consider for Todd Kidd, he's going to be 31 years old. He's in the prime of his career. His championship window is certainly wide open. But I mean, we also said the same thing about Cameron Atwood. And I guess here's the difference, though. It's Ronnie Woods Motorsports versus CJ Barrymore Racing, or Ronnie Woods Motorsports versus Sneaks Enterprise and Greg Healy. Like, Ronnie Woods Motorsports are a powerhouse. And, as long as they have the drivers, the equipment is always going to be there. So I do think there's a much higher chance that Kidd ends up bouncing back next season. Um, you know, Second year with the new regulations, we saw how red hot Ronnie Woods Motorsports were. I mean, you even look at the final 3 races, like they have won 6 out of 8. And then you look at the final 3 races at Computer Motor Speedway, Kidd falls just short to Randall Woods. And you look at West Virginia, Colin Ward falls just short to Graham Darty. And then you look at the finale, Todd Kidd falls just short to Braeden Bennett. Like, they really could have won, 9 out of 11 races to close out the season if a couple different things go their way. So they're going to be back. And I think that for Kidd, you look at the point standings, his biggest competition for the championship might very well be his own teammates. Obviously, Bennett, the defending champion, sure, he's going to be a threat for sure. But Shane Bark and Colin Ward right there, 3rd, 4th in points. You look at Chris Barrymore, you hope that a new crew chief is enough to energize him and get him back in the mix in 2027. I'm telling you, man, like Kidd, I think it's clear that he's the best driver out of all those guys at Ronnie Woods Motorsports. He is their franchise guy. He did just sign the $90 million extension. But yeah, so certainly, I think he can bounce back. And I think that things are much more advantageous for him to bounce back, considering he is still very much in his prime on the year 1 of a long-term extension with the team. We know that Ronnie Woods Motorsports have nailed the new regulations. He'll be back next year. And that should be a scary thought for the competition, because Todd Kidd's villain arc begins when we hit Speed Weeks at Ajax Super Speedway in 2027. Because I guarantee you, he's gonna have a massive chip on his shoulder. Like he's already won a championship, so he doesn't need to prove himself. But after losing one like that, he's gonna have a massive chip on his shoulder. I guarantee that he's gonna be feeling some type of way heading into next year, that he and that team did all that work to get themselves back in the mix just to lose it like that. So yeah. Speaking of championship fights, I can't believe we haven't talked about the Craftsman Series title fight just yet. And boy, oh boy, Caden Dunham. I have it in my notes here. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. And when it comes to what happened to Caden Dunham last Friday night, here's the fact of the matter. He has no one else to blame but himself. Honestly, he has no one else to blame but himself. It's just, all year we were talking about it. The only person that can stop Caden Dunham is himself, just with his reckless driving habits, getting into guys. Like, he doesn't need to do that. He's so fast with his raw pace. He does not need to wreck anyone. He can get around them cleanly. He proved that with his maiden win at the Streets Computerville early in the season, getting around Tony Novella II around the outside. Like, you don't need to wreck people, but I feel like he feels like he can do it to prove a point. That I'm better than everyone. I'm superior. Like, I don't know what satisfaction he gets from doing it, but it came back to bite him, and it came back to bite him in a big way. Now, first off, I think that the ASCA made the right decision to park Nick Painter, to fine him the $100,000, I believe it was. Should they suspend him for next year? No, I think that's way too much. But parking him and fining him all that money, definitely worth it. I think that was absolutely the right call. But did Caden Dunham deserve what he got? Absolutely. Absolutely, he did. And But obviously, if you're race director Josh Player, you don't want to set a precedent that, hey, it's okay to just, if you're 11th, 12th in points, it's okay to just wreck a championship contender like that and, go on about your business without any consequence. So, like, no, you need to lay down the hammer because you don't want guys like a Caden Dunham to abuse that at the club level next season, and stick his hand in the title fight. Like, you needed to make an example out of Painter, and I feel like he did, but also not punish him too much because, again, Caden Dunham deserved what he got. And it was just because you flash back to what they're coming together in Utah, and he dumps Painter at what, 180, 90 miles an hour entering turn three. Extremely dangerous accident. Wasn't parked, was just handed a warning by race director Bob Halpert at the time. And obviously, this is why Halpert got fired, because if he had actually done his job, none of this happens. Painter does not feel the need to retaliate, but there were basically zero consequences to that incident. So Painter was like, okay, you're going to screw me over like that. I'll do you one better. I'll screw you out of a championship. And that's exactly what he did. He showed up for the first race of the season, and he picked the fine time to show up for the final race of the season and completely altered the title fight. And like I said, for Caden Dunham, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. You drive like that all season, incredibly reckless, taking everyone out, using your car like it's a bulldozer. That's the way you lose the championship. And like I said, he didn't have to do that. He led 400 plus laps this season. At the Craftsman Series level, that is literally unheard of. 401 laps led, unheard of. 4 poles this season, 4 wins this season, 8 top 5 finishes. Like, this kid is special. He's a generational talent. But again, as we saw Friday night, the only person that can stop him is himself. And it's just, I think it's karma. I think it's a huge learning lesson for Caden Dunham that, you think you're going to get away with this at the cup level. Get ready for a lot more of that moving forward. It's going to come back. It's going to come back to bite you at some point. It might not be immediately, but when it matters most, when you're least expecting it, that's when it's going to come back to bite you in the ass. And it certainly did for Dunham in this situation right here. Now, we haven't talked about the actual champion, Gunnar Thorson. And I do want to give Thorson his flowers as well, because Thorson, people can call this a Mickey championship all they want to. But Thorson, you know what he did that Dunham didn't? He was consistent. 13 top 10 finishes. He kept his nose clean. He earned the respect of his competitors, to where, he was in a situation like that, no one would dump it. Painter would have found a different way to get around it. Like, they raced Thorson completely differently than they raced Dunham, and there's a reason for that. Because Thorson has earned the respect of his competitors, and that's why he ended up winning the championship. He wasn't the fastest driver that day. He wasn't the fastest driver all season, but the fastest driver doesn't always win the race. Fast driver doesn't always win the championship. Todd Kidd was also the fastest driver on Saturday night. What happened to him? So yeah, Thorson was the most consistent driver. That's who wins championships. The wins, the poles, the lap sled, they're all nice. They're all flashy. They're all great. They got him the cup ride. Congratulations. But keeping your nose clean, earning your competitors' respect, that's what matters most in this business more than anything. And you can't help but not to be happy for Thorson and their Taylor Motorsports boys, because there was a point early in their race, they're staring at a 15-point deficit. And Thorson's like running 7th, 8th, something. Like, he's not running terribly, but Dunham is just out front, dominating. And the entire time they're telling him, and he's telling his team, never give up. It's not over until it's over. And look at what ended up happening. He admitted numerous times that for development program that Dunham had the raw pace advantage, but they were not going to give up fighting until a bitter end. And it's true. Never give up, man. Never give up. So massive congratulations to Gunnar Thorson and Taylor Motorsports are taking home their first ASCA championship. And this kid, I think he's got an extremely bright future in the sport. Um, Raw pace wise, is he as fast as a Dunham? Is he as fast as a Doval? No, but I think that he proved that his consistency this season is what could give him a very long career in the Cup Series, and what could take Taylor Motorsports to that next level. Because they obviously recognize they plateaued a bit with Norm Lester. That the best they can probably do is, fringe top 15. They want to take that next step. They want to compete for championships because, I mean, they've already won, two of them in the NDRL. Could very well win a third this season. So they want to take that next step in 2027, and bringing in such a young talent like Thorson. Now he's got a Craftsman Series championship to his name. The kid's got wisdom beyond his years. He showed it with his maturity, the way he handled that championship fight. I think there's a lot of other drivers that would have handled it completely differently, that would have freaked out at the way Dunham was racing them, and for good reason, because things looked stacked against Thorson most of the second half of the season. It looked like he was done, but he never gave up. He kept pushing, he kept digging, and it ended up, his persistence, his perseverance ended up paying off in the end with the title for he and Taylor Motorsports. And as for Caden Dunham, it's a missing ring, but he only has himself to blame. The way he raced, the way he carried himself all season, he was acting like the championship was over last week. There was still another race to run, and he put an extremely massive target on his back for no reason. And yeah, so he only has himself to blame for that. So that is what it is, and hopefully he learns a lot from this loss, this defeat, and carries that over to the Cup level in 2027. But let's talk about the site of the finale, because as I mentioned earlier, there's been a lot of rumors circulating that Belltown Speedpark may lose championship week once their contract is up at the end of the 2027 season. And for the longest time, I was on team move the finale from Belltown. I thought that it had gotten stale. I mean, it's hosted the finale all but one season since 2014. And the only season it didn't was obviously the strike zone in 2015 season. I think that it seemed like it had gotten stale, because let's face it, most years the Cup championship had been locked up on the penultimate weekend, whether that be at Ajax Super Speedway or Diego Urquidy doing it at West Virginia. In 2024, like, for the most part, the championship had already been locked up going into the finale, and then the finale itself was just mid. It was just Greg Healy or Cameron Atwood just destroying the field, putting on a masterclass, and you hand out the trophy to the champion. He gets to do the burnout with the championship flag. It was meh. It was mid. Yeah, but these past two seasons have definitely changed my mind on that. You look at the racing that this track has produced for these past two Cup Series title deciders, and it has you on the edge of your seat each time. Especially, like, they've hit a gold mine with this VHT traction agent, because it forces these drivers to adapt. Those first 40 to 50 laps, you're cruising on the bottom. You need a car that can wrap your bottom and work perfectly around the bottom. But then once the tires wear out, deeper into the stint, then you got to search around. Then sometimes it's the bottom that works, sometimes it's the top that works, and it forces these drivers to adapt on the fly. Tire wear also pivotal. That tire strategy is what brought us the fantastic finish we saw in the Cup Series title fight. You also got the bump and run now, basically a thing with the bottom of the racetrack being the dominant groove, as we saw with Caden Dunham. Yeah, like, I feel like the past 2 years have definitely been rejuvenated Belltown as a season finale race. to a level that I didn't think was even possible. Like I thought things were getting stale here, but look at what the show that it's put on for the past two title deciders. I'm having a hard time justifying moving it away to like a West Virginia or Computer Motor Speedway. And it's not to take away from West Virginia or Computer Motor Speedway, considering the finishes the past 2 weeks there have been outstanding as well. But just the factor of you can pull off bump and runs for a championship, which we very nearly saw on Saturday night, getting physical like that for the title. Um, at any other track, Braeden Bennett could not do what he did to keep P1. The only place he could do that would be on a short track like Belltown. And any other place he would have been a sitting duck. Or, he does end up boxing at any other track. And we basically see a chalk finish. We don't see what we did, is what I'm trying to say. And like I said, Belltown, I thought it had been getting stale, but after looking at the shows that it's put on, even at the Craftsman level this season, outstanding finale. With the plot twist of the century, Dunham getting Painter getting his revenge on Dunham, and then obviously the last two for Cup have been otherworldly, like historically good championship finales. Like, man, I really think that there needs to be an extension signed. I Like I said, I thought it had been getting stale, but you look at what's coming. You look at the past 2 years here. You got to extend this place, man. You got to bring it back, run it back for 2028 and beyond, man. Keep it on the schedule. Yeah. So that's my thoughts on Belltown. Like I said, I was team move it before, but after Saturday night, now I think that the ASC needs to do what they can to keep this race as the final one of the campaign. Because I feel like if you move it, then people in 2 to 3 years are going to be like, man, why aren't we still racing at Belltown for the finale? Just like it was with Ajax Super Speedway as a penultimate race. There were a lot of people saying, move it from the penultimate round. And then it gets moved for West Virginia. And then everyone's like, why aren't we racing at Ajax Super Speedway again? I feel like it'll be the same situation with Belltown as a finale. So there's that. Let's also touch on silly season briefly because the final ride, full-time ride for the 2027 season was filled this morning. Toby Beckett signed a 1-year prove-it deal with Tico Bowden Motorsports to drive the number 10 car for next season. Not really too much to say about this because it's Tico Bowden Motorsports and it's Toby Beckett. This isn't really that much of an inspiring hire. Although I will say that Beckett certainly did get the short end of the stick at Michael White Racing. Not Michael White Racing, correction. I'm thinking about Jared Ayers moving to Revolution Racing. He got the short end of the stick at Revolution Racing, getting booted out after basically, what was it, half a season that he ran, and they kicked him out. They dropped him off like that. I think that was ridiculous. I get why Revolution did it, but I also think that Beckett certainly got the short end of the stick in that deal. And I think that for Tico Bowden Motorsports, honestly, they should have just shut this seat down completely. Why is it even running? I mean, you're barely competitive. You're not even. You barely have one car competitive. Like, why are you still running the 10 and the 14 when you can barely field one competitive ride? And in fairness to Doug Bowden, he should have done a lot better than he did this season, but his luck was absolutely terrible, abysmal this season. That's completely out of his control. Bowden took a big step up this year, and I'm definitely looking forward to see what he can do in 2027 with hopefully better luck, because he was carrying that number 4 car up there in a few races, including the finale at Belltown. But yeah, for Beckett, I'm not expecting much because we haven't seen much out of the 10 and the 14 at all. And I don't even know how long. Devin Smith couldn't save the 14. Nick Painter couldn't save the 14. Jack Fronwell couldn't save the 14. Grant Von Duvedo couldn't save the 14. Then you look at the 10 car, Jack Alaus couldn't save the 10. Ryan Braun couldn't save the 10. The only driver that's been able to save the 10 is Cameron Atwood. And that's because Atwood is a world class driver, one of the best in the sport, who is just stuck in TBM equipment. So my hopes are not high for Beckett, but you hope that hopefully he can find his footing here. I mean, there's not really much development that goes on in Tico Bowden Motorsports, so I'm not even confident that he's going to take the next step in his development that he hasn't since his rookie season in Craftsman way back in 2023. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe he could prove me wrong and he goes on this crazy run. And I don't know. Maybe he steals a win next season out of plate track. I don't know. But it's an uninspiring hire, and I'm still trying to figure out what CBM is trying to accomplish by running the 10 and the 14. Like, these teams are going nowhere. They are perpetual back markers. At this point, like, just shut those two rides down and focus on Doug. That's what they should do, but it's Tico. You can't tell Tico to do anything because he's not going to listen. So I'll leave him to it, and that's pretty much that. But let's talk about 2026 in review. And I had a chance to think about the year as a whole. This is the final segment, by the way. I know this has been an extremely long show, but it's the final one of the season. So we had to cover a lot. But 2026 in review, the first year with the V6 turbo hybrid engines. And I get there was a lot of trepidation surrounding the new regs and all that. And I certainly think that they delivered and then some. Now, I get it. You look at, on paper, only like Michael Wire Racing, Ronnie Woods Motorsports, those two organizations together combined to win 12 out of the 17 races this season or something crazy. But overall, you look at it, there were 11 different winners this season. That hasn't happened since 2020. 11 different winners. Like, again, we have not seen that in a very long time. And 2020 was also a reg switch as well with the low downforce package that they were running at the time. So you look at that, it definitely, I would say, leveled the playing field amongst the big teams. I don't think it leveled the playing field as much as the ASCA would have hoped for, like, getting the smaller guys up there. Although it is worth noting, Flores Motorsports, Snoots Enterprises, they were definitely competitive. But I also think it is worth noting how much of that is just Ford being terrible this year. That we didn't see someone like a CJ Barrymore Racing up there in the fold, or Kidios Racing, normally dominant. They only scored one win all season. Diego went winless. That never happened. It hadn't happened since 2014. So, Ford was definitely down. They were nerfed, obviously. And you had Michael Wright Racing and Ronnie Woods Motorsports kind of taking their place atop the sport. I think Ford will be back next season, which should make next year even more competitive, you would think, especially with the Darty win. That definitely gives them a lot of momentum. And then you move up a generational talent like Dunham. Like, yeah, they're going to compete next season. But yeah, 11 different winners. That's nothing to scoff at, to say the least. And so overall, I do think they were a success. We also had 4 first-time winners this season. No driver won more than 3 races, and it took until the 17th race on the calendar to get a driver to win 3 races, that obviously being the champion, Braeden Bennett. So, when you compare that to last year when Caden Orchidi won 9 of the 16 races, and then this year, things are much more evenly distributed. The most laps led of any driver this season was Bennett with 372. Compare that to Dunham leading 401 laps on its own in the Craftsman Series this year. So yeah, I think that we saw things much more leveled amongst the big teams. I think you definitely need to do some work on getting the smaller teams more involved, like in Dexter Ansie's Motorsports. They took a major step back, but how much of that is Laquan obviously not carrying them anymore? For CJ Barrymore Racing, I think you can attribute that to Ford being down. For Kidios Racing, Ford was down. So Tico Bowden Motorsports, Bowden had terrible luck. Otherwise, he would have been in the mix. Pillar Motorsports, I think, was just Lester. Lester and his crew chief didn't really get along much, but yeah. So I think overall, though, they were a success, and you can't not look at the last 3 weeks and say that they weren't a success. Like those last three races were unbelievable in terms of the finishes, like unbelievable. And then you look at other moments like Ajax Super Speedway. I look at that duel between Park and Ward at Michigan. I look at Park coming back the next day with that pass on Randall Woods. San Diego with Kid coming back late. That was really good. The Windows 300 also incredible between Runnard and Barrymore. There were so many iconic moments this season. Not really many snoozers, to be honest with you. I mean, outside of West Virginia, where Healy destroyed the field the first time out there, and then the Ajax Super Speedway return. I guess you could probably throw Utah in that camp as well. Ronnie was Motorsports 1, 2, 3, but yeah, like I said, there weren't many snoozers. I think they were a success overall. I think definitely the ASA, there's some tweaks that need to be made to level the playing field that much more. But overall, I think that they need to be proud of the changes that were made to the Cup Series, especially now the ASA is getting more carbon neutral, or it's completely carbon neutral, I should say. That's a big step forward in terms of the environment and the government regulations. So I think that the new regs were certainly a success, and I cannot wait for the 2027 season. Now they have a year under their belt, they have data, they have the analytics. We'll see who can take that next step and continue to improve and who will regress back to the mean. But yeah, that is it for the 2026 season, the first year of the rebranded around the association. Thank you all. Thank you to everyone who's listened to any sort of episode this season, who's watched any race this season. It was a fantastic year in the ASCA. And yeah, the 12th season of the modern era is in the books. Gunnar Thorson and Braeden Bennett are the Craftsman and Ajax Cup champions, respectively. And the next time we come back, I will be here to preview the 2027 edition of Speed Weeks very soon. I will see you then. This is Charles Fallon signing out for the final time in 2026. See you then.